Hello, welcome to a special episode of Trade Movies Podcast. This is going to be a little bit different today. So we have two great guests with us today, talking about a new book that is coming out that if you listen to the podcast or my channel, I'm sure you will love. So with me, I have Larry McQueen and Coleen Scott. So Larry McQueen is a leading Hollywood costume historian, archivist, and consultant responsible for the authentication of film costumes and the estimation of their value. Mr. McQueen's private collection of film costumes is one of the finest and consists of over 600 costumes worn in films and television from 1920 to present. Portions of his collection have been exhibited in museums across the globe. And Coleen Scott is a costume designer, educator, and historian who has worked for over 25 years in theater, opera, film, and television. Her book, The Costumes of Burlesque, was published by Routledge. Is it Routledge or Routledge? I always forget. Routledge in 2019. She's a proud member of IATSE, I think it is. Is that IATSE USA 829? Coleen is tenured faculty in the Theater Arts and Fashion Department at Santa Rosa Junior College in California, heading the costume design, technology, and makeup programs. Larry and Coleen, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
So I am really excited to do this interview. So Larry and Coleen have a book out called The Costumes of Hollywood, Highlights from the Collection of Motion Picture Costume Design. And I can't remember, I think honestly, the way I saw it on Larry's website. So Larry, as mentioned in the intro, has one of the most stunning collections of costumes you'll ever see. And I saw Larry on the Criterion. This is why people out there always please buy physical media, because I saw Larry did a great special feature on the Now Voyager Criterion copy where he talked about Ori Kelly and Betty Davis and the fashion of that movie, which is so important to the movie itself and Betty Davis's emotional journey. And Larry gave such a good explanation of it. So I was like, who is Larry McQueen? And so I looked him up, and he has one of the coolest websites, I've ever seen. And then I was so excited when I saw that there was a book. So I guess for Larry or Coleen, I mean, maybe Larry, how did the idea for the book get started? Why did you decide to do a book?
I didn't. Coleen did. I had done an interview for Costume Society of America. It was a blog, and I think it was during COVID. And they were taking questions and answers, and I did a PowerPoint presentation on the collection and how I got started and why and all that stuff. And they were taking questions from the audience, and somebody said, "Have you ever thought of writing a book?" And I went, "No, I wouldn't have the slightest idea how to start." And a few days later, Coleen called, and that's how it started. I mean, to me, it came as a total shock, because for years, what I've done, I mean, I do what I do because I like doing it. Mm-hmm. Even my friends don't understand what I do, and no one really seemed to care. I mean, it was just something that I enjoyed doing, and I thought it was important, and so I did it. So I was shocked when she finally said, "Oh, I think you have a story to tell," and then convinced me to tell it.
Coleen, it seems like you're the onus for the book. So could you tell us how that happened?
It's her fault.
Thank you, I want to say for all the audience and everything, is like for encouraging Larry to do this book and helping get it done, because it's so wonderful to have this history.
Thank you. I agree, and I'm excited. I mean, I think the bulk of the work was convincing Larry. I didn't have to try that hard once we became friends. Really, it was that he did that event with CSA. It was during COVID, and I attended it, and I was fascinated with the things that I saw. So I approached Larry after, not to write a book, but I approached him after just to talk more about these things that he had discussed, and the fact that they mentioned that he had so many other costumes. It just seemed really significant, and I was wondering why there wasn't a book yet, because it was such a huge collection. And Larry just had a memory the other day that I might have, in that presentation, put a question in the chat that was, "Have you thought about making a book of this?" So I probably did. Do that. But I met with Larry just to talk about it after the fact, just to talk about the things he had and hear his stories, because he had lots of stories to tell. And we did that a few times, and then I went and saw the studio. I think I went and visited the studio,
Hmm.
and we talked there. I might have planted the seed at that point. I don't remember. We were developing a friendship for a while,
Well,
and then I saw him in person. I think
you
probably a seed
also
was
sent
planted.
me a copy of the burlesque book, which
That's right.
was which and I got because she said, "Well, I've written the book," and so and she sent it to me, and I read it, and it was like it was a good book, and it was intelligent, it was fun, it was and it was like, okay, she can write. Okay, she is an author. She has a book with her name on it. So it was so that yeah, that was what I started to trust who she was, and okay, she's legit.
That it just wasn't like a wacky costume lady who was like,
Yeah.
tell me about all your sparkly things. That's
Yeah,
what I
yeah,
want to know.
yeah.
Um, yeah, that's how it developed. And then uh part of the reason the project even became real was because my publisher said, "Oh, your burlesque book is still doing well. We're happy with this book. Are you interested in writing anything else?" And at that point, I think I had been talking to Larry for almost a year. And I was like, "Actually, I have this idea." And for them it was kind of an odd idea.
Hmm.
Um for the books that they publish, it was a little bit like, what category do we put this in? Do we put it in? We don't put it in theater. They kind of have entertainment, but my acquisitions editor, Stacy, ended up taking it on within her branch. And so
Hmm.
they greenlit it after our proposal. But we were able to talk about it. Larry and I have a really many, I think many conversations about what this even meant and how it would possibly be structured, because you have to have so much of a specific idea of that even when you send the proposal in.
Hmm.
So that was many conversations and meetings and chats and stories. Um and Larry, I think, Larry, would you say you got scared for a minute and then like you disappeared for a minute and then I tracked you
Probably.
down and you came back?
Probably did. Probably did. Well, the whole concept of, it's sort of like when somebody says, "Well, I want to write about what your life and what you've done," and it's like, I don't know. I don't know what I've done. So, I mean, a lot of it was, which, I mean, it was, the whole thing was sort of a good therapy session too, because it was taking a look at, what has been collected, what was done, what was the stories that were trying to be told, and those all happened over years, and it just, and it wasn't all at once, and it was a piece here, a piece there, a piece there, and then it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and nobody seemed to care. My friends certainly didn't. So it was it was like all of it sort of came together. So when it came time to say, okay, what story we're going to tell, and what pieces are we going to? I mean, I think the book features over 100
104, I
piece,
think we
104
squeezed in.
pieces from the collection. And I mean, the collection isn't huge. It's only about 650, but it's
It's
still,
only 650 pieces, Jeff. It's only 650.
well,
Well,
compared to some. I mean, Debbie
you're
Reynolds
right.
were
I know, but it's
thousands and
still,
thousands,
yeah.
it's something, so I mean, it's substantial. It's just not the biggest, but and it's like, okay, what pieces are we going to show? How are we going to create stories around those pieces that are going to have some sort of cohesive thing that's going to wind through the book? And that part was kind of scary. It
Hmm.
was fun. I mean, there would be lists of pieces, and then she would whack them out,
Yeah, one giant list.
Yeah, one
Right.
giant
I
list.
said I said at the beginning, I said to Larry, I mean, we had talked for a long time, right? So I had an understanding of why and how he and Bill had started the collection and their philosophy behind it, and the fact that they wanted these things to be able to be seen by the public. There's all that kind of background to this collection that makes it significant. The way Larry takes care of these things and the way they're stored, the museum level techniques that he uses, those things all make this extra special, this
Yeah.
collection. And so that already was a baseline. But he and Bill had dreams about how these groupings could already happen. Like they
Yeah.
collected with some groupings in mind and stories they wanted to tell in mind. And that was helpful for us
Mhm.
to figure out what chapters this might be. Like, think of each chapter as an exhibition that you wanted the public to see. That was where we started. But also, I said to Larry, I said, okay, well, there's lots of things that haven't been seen. He said, that hadn't been on exhibit necessarily, and had kind of been waiting for their moment. And I said, make me a list of your favorite things that you think are the most important to show in this book, because we're definitely not going to be able to do the whole collection. And I think the list was 300, right? It was like half.
Well,
It was
you
like half
asked.
of the costumes. And I was like, well, listen, this is a great start. But now we're gonna have to have a conversation about how, like, it's gonna be like little heartbreaks as we go,
Yeah,
because
there
Yeah.
there's gonna
was.
be some slashing and burning that has to
Yeah.
happen just to pare it down and make the book cohesive in a way that it tells a historical story, and that it um gives you a good view of the variety that's there, even though
Mhm.
there are so many costumes, especially at the end, right at the end there, when we're dealing with page counts and word counts, and we had to take out some stuff that it was like, this is just so important and it needs to be
Yeah.
here. So there's still a lot more to be seen, and we keep joking about volume 2, but I'm tired and
Oh,
Larry's
please.
tired. So right now
Both
we're
of us
just
go
gonna
give us a
celebrate
break.
Please.
Yeah,
this first
maybe
one.
later.
I would personally read about 10,000 pages of this. I was literally just sat
is
down. It's rare for me because I watch a ton of movies, but not that I don't read as much, but like it's rare for me to just sit down and just be so totally enthralled by a book. So it really is wonderful. And I do totally the heartbreak. I was starting to get it myself because I had been on the website, and so I'd seen, like, I had immediately when I found the website, I had like, oh, this
Yeah.
is cool. I was like, I hope this is the book. I hope this made it.
It
The only
is.
heartbreak I think, just to I Possessed is I really love the movie Possessed with Joan Crawford, and
Yeah,
there's a couple pieces. I think Mildred
Yeah.
Pierce made it. I actually like
Yeah.
Yeah.
Possessed a little bit more, but Mildred Pierce is definitely the more popular
Oh yeah,
movie, right? But they're both great.
yeah.
That's exciting.
It was fun.
So I guess in terms of the state, I was curious when I learned about this in the book. Is a question for either of you about what is the general state of like costume collection and like museum display of costumes? Like, is there a main museum? Because I had gone to, I think, the Museum of the Moving Image last year
Oh
in New
yeah,
York
they're
City.
gone.
Are they
The
gone?
one in no,
Well,
the one in
no.
London. There was a museum of moving engines, London,
Okay.
and
Larry,
they've closed
scaring me.
down, and their costumes were given to the V&A or some adjunct of the V&A.
Gotcha.
Um, I didn't know there was a.
Yeah, in New
I
York
didn't
City,
know.
in Queens, there's a Museum of the
Queen.
in Moving Image.
Oh, okay. I
It's
have heard
across the
of
street
that.
from Silver Cup, right? It's across the street from Silver Cup Studios, I'm pretty
I
sure, because
Okay.
I used to
I
see it
think
every
so.
morning when I went
Yeah.
home. It's like,
And when I went to New York City last year, I had a chance to go. They had a great Jim Henson exhibit, and so they had all the stuff from Fraggle Rock, and Sesame Street, and the Muppets, and what was real exciting was Labyrinth. They had like the full costume of David Bowie's, and they had the like I can't remember if it's like a jean jacket that Jennifer Beal, is it? I always forget the
it's
terrible with the name.
Connolly. It's Jennifer Connolly.
Jennifer Connelly, yeah,
You should
Jennifer
look that
Connelly, and it was great to see. But I was thinking, like, I wonder if there's a place, and then I wonder if there's like a whole museum for this. So I guess, like, is there like a place in the United States or foreign that has like a big collection like this? Or
Mm.
That's film specific, you mean?
yeah, I guess film or theater. I mean, costuming in general.
There, as far as that is totally dedicated just to costumes, no.
Mhm.
There's, I mean, the Academy Museum, which is fairly new. It's about 5 years old now, something like that.
Mhm.
And I do show things with them, but it's fairly new, and they have a small section which deals with costumes. And maybe that, maybe that is all the audience, a public would stand is to have a gallery or two of costumes. I mean, an entire museum, might be a little bit overwhelmed, or it might not be financially viable that you're going to find enough people that are interested enough just in costumes to go to this museum. So I don't know what the reason is, but no, I mean, I wish there was places that showed more,
Yeah.
and showed them in a way. And even there are even the FIT and stuff. Once in a while they'll do film, but most of it, or FITM, or which is now ASU, FITM. But it's sort of like they'll show couture, and they'll show, which is, they're busy showing their things. So it's like, oh, another movie exhibition. Wow.
Mm.
They want to show the couture lines, and they want to show their collections. So it's, no,
Mm.
there isn't a place that specifically deals with it. There are places that will show it, and and it's.
It's the film and theater aspect of it. It's not, there are museums that are dedicated to costume history, right? That have fashion or have, they have fashion, then they have some film, and then and there's international museums that are fashion museums. There's the Kyoto Fashion Institute. There's the huge collection at the Met, the Metropolitan
Mhm.
Costume Institute. Those things, they have huge collections, but they're not film or television or theater centric. Um, but they are massive museums that are, were developed to show all different types of art.
Mhm.
So even if they have a huge collection, you could take the Met Costume Institute collection and make it its own museum, and it would be huge, and it would be able to do big exhibitions, sorry, but it's part of a larger
Mhm.
institute, and I think that's much more common, especially because of the amount of care and storage and financial support that's needed to have a collection and dedicated staff that are knowledgeable about textiles versus other types of artifacts and that kind of preservation. Yeah, it's rare. Larry's worked with a lot of museums that do fashion or,
Mhm.
that have those kinds of collections and the people who know how to work on them. But
Mhm.
And they are expensive exhibitions to do,
yeah,
Mm.
because it's not like, and I know there's more to it than this, but it's not like taking a frame photograph and just hanging it on the wall.
Mhm.
I mean, you have to create forms to fit these things, and if you truly do it correctly, you know, you create forms that perfectly fit those pieces, because those pieces were tailored to fit on a
Yeah.
specific body to create a certain effect in a film.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
so if you just have it on a size 3 mannequin, but it's actually a size 4, and you pad up a little bit here and a little bit there to fill it out, it's not going to have the same effect. I mean,
Yeah.
I recently worked on an exhibition that surprisingly, and it wasn't all the way there, but it
Mhm.
was, they worked on it. It was an exhibition in Oklahoma City on Edith Head. And it was the first time they had asked whether or not they could create the forms, or to build the forms in my loft for my pieces. And
Mhm.
at first it was like, oh, that's going to be a mess. But then I thought, oh, I'm going to learn how to do something.
Mm.
And so they were teaching. So they got me, there's other people working on it, but they gave me an anatomy book, and said, how you're making those breasts, and you have two little bumps there. That is not a breast. A breast starts at the shoulders, and it has muscles, and it has
Mm.
muscles that come here, and it goes here, and it goes up under the arm, and it does
It's
all
like
this
learning
thing.
sculpting.
It's sculpting.
Yeah,
and
that's
and it's
exactly
like you
what he
have to
did.
create that, because that is part, you can't just fill out the parts you think, then you got to go out. I found it fascinating. And when I saw the difference when you would put it on, and it almost looked, I mean, it was still a form,
Mhm.
and it didn't have movement. I mean, that's the next step in the lessons, is you learn how to create movement in forms.
Mhm.
But it was such a big difference, and it was something that was totally new to me. And I loved the process. I loved learning new things, period.
Yeah.
And that was, that was wonderful, but it makes such a difference. But they are expensive to do.
Mm.
And so that is one reason they don't. And also because it is a textile, and some of these textiles are approaching 100 years old now.
Yeah.
So it's like you can't, and the way that museums now have to mount an exhibition is that it has to run for 2 years to make your money back, or
Really?
they find it, they'll mount it and then they'll send it to 3 other museums and make a profit on it. So we'll mount it and we'll make a profit on it.
Mm.
And that's too long.
Yeah.
That's too long. You can't have a piece standing up like that under lights and stuff like that for that long. You just can't. You have to give them a rest. And
Yeah.
and that's one of the things that I sort of decided along the way, that I didn't want these things falling apart on my watch. So
Yeah.
it was like, and so I'm picky about exhibitions that are shown, what they are shown in, the conditions that they're shown in. I no longer do, well, I never originally knew I did, but one of the first exhibits that and Bill, my like business partner, and I did was in Spain, and we didn't know somebody wanted to show the pieces. We were really excited to see it and everything like that. They were in a window of a store and came back half of the side
Yeah.
faded. That was a big learning. It's like ask
Wow.
where these are going to be shown, and ask
Yeah.
about the light levels and the temperature control. Now that is a part of the loan agreement, but back then it was like, oh, somebody wants to see it, wow, and it'll come back ruined, and they can.
Yeah.
So they're fragile, they're delicate, they're expensive, and that is why a lot of them aren't hard to do, or that's hard to get them mounted.
Yep.
Yeah. I noticed that in your in the passage. I can't remember which dress it was in the book or which costume it was in the book, but you talked about not buying a Sid Charisse dress or a piece from
Oh,
Sombrero
yes.
because the beauty was in the
Yes.
movement.
It
And I thought,
was.
yeah, is that I wanted to ask about, like, do you well, all this strikes me. I wonder if there's if any deep pocketed people listen to and want to start a museum, please,
That
for just
sounds great,
dedicated.
Seth.
Please
That
call.
sounds
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Call me.
It
Yeah.
almost strikes me as an argument for having a place where you can maybe have some of the forms that you could reuse, and, like, if you had
Yeah.
more of them in a place, then you could rotate them so that
Yeah.
they wouldn't be sort of exposed. That might actually be
Yeah.
good.
That
Uh,
happens at the academy, right? Like they put
mhm.
things on exhibit and then there's a time for the permanent exhibition that they have up, and then Larry's items rotate so that they're not up. They're only up for a certain amount of time, right, Larry? And then
Right.
they switch out. So that happens for sure. It has to
Mhm.
happen.
Yeah.
But
So
it's fun, but it's sort of like you said with the Sid Charisse. I mean, so many of these pieces, the which is the sad thing about it. It's sort of like when I first met Bill Thomas, which we can get into later, but he used to do live fashion shows, and I used to assist him on them, and I was usually backstage making sure nobody's rip something. And I know that is now no longer a no. I do not do that. But it was like, but then it was like, oh, this is cool. I'm getting to see cool things, and so I'd be backstage and I'd be pushing the ladies on when it was time to go on and all of that sort of thing. And somebody stepped on the train of a dress in front of them, and the entire
Mhm.
thing tore off at the waist. And that's when we realized, oh, you can't do this. You
Yeah.
can't do this anymore. But part of the nice thing about those exhibitions was to see them move. I mean,
Yeah.
because some of them, they were created to move,
Yeah.
and that's sad that you can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
But it's especially the things that were created for dance. I mean, they were created to do that,
Yeah.
and they can't do it anymore. Which
Everything
is
Sid
what
Charisse did, right?
everything,
yeah,
and that's why.
yeah.
I would love to see her singing in the rain, like whatever that
Uh,
100-foot long dress
That
is.
that train
Yeah.
there was this it was somebody just contacted me about how long was that train, and I'd always heard it was 40 yards, but somebody said 55 yards,
It
and it was like,
seems
oh,
impossible.
Wow.
Yeah. It seems that is probably it's probably maybe the most impressive scene, I think, in all of
yeah,
movies. The thinking about how they got that dress to perform like it did, no CGI.
yeah.
I can't even imagine.
I mean,
Yeah.
I heard that it was like I don't know how many fans they had on that thing. And I have a feeling there were for wires holding these tails
Hmm.
up in the
Oh,
air
there
too,
had to be. Yeah.
because it would have been flipping a little bit too fast. And they were just going, you know,
Yeah,
rhythmically in the air. And it was like, how did they do that?
yeah,
So I'm sure that, I'm sure some of those things would be, I think would be fascinated if they ever came out a program at how did they do this scene? You
yeah,
know, and let
That
us
would be
know,
cool.
because it's just it's filmmaking, and it's
yeah. Absolutely. I did want to ask. So it kind of ties in. One of the questions I wanted to ask because, Colleen, you're an educator, and
Hmm.
so certainly you're in contact with a lot of younger folks about all this stuff and teaching them. One thing is kind of like I was saddened, but then I was heartened about when there was the controversy over. I'm not even going to say the person's name because I don't necessarily want to cause an internet thing, but the Marilyn
Yeah.
Monroe dress that was worn to the Met Gala, I
Yeah.
believe that there was some controversy. Or was it ripped? And then Ripley said it wasn't actually ripped. It came ripped like that. And then she put on a replica or something like that. It saddened me to know that a costume might have gotten hurt, but then it heartened me because everyone was yelling about it. So it's like, oh, it's like so many people care about this. So I guess in like both of your experience, maybe Colleen first, like,
mhm.
do you find, um, some of the stuff with like, I guess even to add on to it, like I'm heartened to kind of see the rise, I guess, in like experiential activities like, Harry Potter Land or, theme parks. Like it seems like the younger generation is really seems to really like kind of like living in a lot of this stuff, which makes
Oh, yeah.
me optimistic for costumes because, I'm sure, if you go see, if you're a big Nosferatu fan, right? If there's a little Nosferatu world, you might want to go see all the costumes, which might do well, mean that more people care about it. So do you find that in your experiences with younger folks that there's like a big passion there?
I do. I mean, I'm fortunate that my students, a lot of them come to me because they already have an interest, but definitely cosplay, like the world of
Mm,
cosplay is a pool of people who are entering my classes because they want to improve their sewing skills to make cosplay
yeah.
outfits. So it's certainly a newer vein of work. Basically,
Mhm.
it's because there's a lot of people who are doing it for a hobby, but there are people who are making a living doing tutorials on how to build costume pieces, and then there are people who are doing custom looks for other people, and um, so there's definitely a vein of work related to costume design and costume construction in cosplay. And I do think there's an interest in it. And I do think a lot of it is tied to media and film, and especially anime and manga
Sure.
characters. There's a lot more of that, I would even say, with cosplay.
Interesting.
So yeah, I do think there's a vein of interest with young people, but I'm probably biased because of my job. Um, I I don't know. I had a different thought when Larry was talking about I don't know if that's going too backwards, but when
No, go
Larry's
ahead.
talking about how kind of it's a little bit sad that you don't get to see the costumes move again because we're
Yeah.
trying to preserve them and not ruin them. And um, even on exhibit, you have a sliver of an idea of the intention. You know, when you get to see them in person, you get to see the different elements of them, the silhouette and the shape, and
Hmm.
it's tangible in front of you. And so there's value to even seeing it, any of these costumes, not in motion. But I will say that Larry, as a collector, is always he's thinking about the audience's experience of viewing these things when they're exhibited, and the fact that he's gone so far as to replicate things just to enhance the look of that ensemble for public view
Hmm.
is extra special, and I think it does add to to the audience's experience even though that costume's not in motion anymore. You know,
Yeah.
seeing a piece of jewelry accompany it, seeing the different accessories so that the whole ensemble is complete does make a huge difference.
Yeah. I noticed that particularly when I love the movie Dick Tracy, and I
Mm.
know the styling that you did with the, I think you have the coat in the hat, but you styled it with the suit under it, which I thought was really
Hmm.
impressive. It's interesting you say that. One of my more popular videos is on, I think I open it with, what does it feel like to cry in this dress, talking about Rita Hayworth and Gilda. As far as like why I like to see personally costume design in movies, and as a I have weird interests, right? But I'm also almost as big a hockey fan as I am a movie fan, and so I really like ice skating. I grew up ice skating, and all that. And so the only way that I can see the individual sort of sport or a skill of ice skating generally is in if I watch hockey. And I kind of thought in my head, I came upon this idea that the only way I would have ever see someone like Rita Hayworth or anyone cry in a dress, hopefully near me, or like do that is in a movie, right? So it's like the projection of not just like if you on the red carpet, right? You see people and it's like they're presenting and they're very knowledgeable of like where the camera is and they're posing.
Yeah.
But when Rita Hayworth's doing, I mean, she's acting, but she is crying in the dress. She's rolling around with it. She's being a femme fatale. She's doing all this. And it's like a way to, I guess, express it. And so I wanted to, I guess, before we get into the looking at the costumes, for you both is, Larry, you had spoken a little bit off camera about sort of where you learn to like I guess appreciate or first watch movies and discovering like with theater all the things that you liked and the grease paint. So I'm just curious, I guess question to Larry and Coleen, like do you all find yourself like just enjoying the movies just for the costume design, like almost as a reason to see the movie as an expression of the art? Is that like part of the experience of movies for you?
For me, it's like it's to a certain extent, it's sort of, especially if it's a period piece, if it is, I am looking at costumes, and I sometimes don't even know what the film was about. It depends. It depends. It depends. It depends how good the movie is. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes the costumes were the only thing worthwhile watching.
Yeah.
But it was like, yeah, you do look at it differently. I mean, I also sometimes get tired of it because there's been over the years and the research and everything that we've done and the processing the different collections and researching costume pieces. I sped through so many films that I thought have seen
Yeah.
and realized that I didn't really see them. I saw the scenes go whizzing by and I would stop on each new scene to see what costumes were in those frames. And then I'd speed on to the next. So I thought I had seen those films and, hadn't.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so sometimes that's kind of bad, but well, a lot of times it's kind of bad because then they said, well, how did the film end? And it was like, I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know.
It's interesting how that changes from generation to generation. I got a fair amount of commenters when I made a post about Dick Tracy because I love Dick Tracy. I grew up on it. My parents loved it. And I think as a kid, I just loved it for the costumes, the makeup. It's like probably, I think, one of the last major Hollywood productions with no CGI. And so I just remember loving for that, but everyone's like, well, this kind of doesn't have a great story. Like maybe it's like not plotted too well, but I'm like, what are you talking? This is one of the best movies,
Well,
best movies of the '90s.
visually, it was absolutely wonderful. I mean, and
Yeah.
you could make your case about, well, I didn't like this actor, I didn't like that actor, but it was like the way that and the thing that fascinated me about that, and of course it was because of the costumes, but was that she had a they told her to stay within the comic strip color choices.
Yeah, the seven colors.
She convinced them to add a few more colors to it, but she held true to those colors. And then their experiments to dye it to make sure that those colors are what, which is a lot of times they would have done or do as far as test the colors. Okay, does this come out? Does that trench coat look like that electric yellow trench coat
Yeah.
that people expect it to be, or is it a little drab? Okay, we need to do another color. So, I mean, the experimentation that goes on that, and that was the colors in that movie. Everything was on. They would walk into the scene, a scene, and this scene had the same color hues. I mean, it was all so manipulated and so. And costumes became so much a part of art design, and that's exciting when you see all those departments coming together. I mean, it's how that should be.
Yeah.
But when they do come together and they create something, and it's like I don't remember it necessarily being an amazing film, but I remember loving it
Yeah.
because it was so visually wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, I'll go watch something if the costumes look amazing. I'll go watch it because they look amazing. I'll watch a movie because a costume designer worked on it that I
Mhm.
adore or admire, and I want to see their newest work. But I try, I try really hard to watch the movie and enjoy the movie. And if there's anything really spectacular, it will take me out of it a little bit because I appreciate how much work goes into them
Yeah.
really to make those things come to life and happen. Um, but I can balance it. I think I'm better at balancing it now and like allowing myself to be entertained and not. If I am really familiar with the story,
Mhm.
and then I go watch it for the costumes, then it's harder. It's harder to not just like, oh, the designer made this decision. Oh, look at this color palette in this scene because they decided that this had to happen. Um, I will do that. But I do think Larry's point too about if the overall production design, if things are really cohesive and you can tell they're just meshing together
Yeah.
perfectly as something like that can go, then it won't take you out
Yeah.
as often because you'll be enthralled with the visuals of everything. I feel like Barbie was really a
Yeah.
recent one where I watched it and I was just like, this production design is amazing and this
Yeah.
Yeah.
team worked so well together that everything just fit.
Yeah.
And it always, if that happens, it enhances the story so much. And I mean, that's our world, right? That's my career, my job too. It's always give me a script and your job is to make the story believable,
Mm.
and make the audience, bring the audience into it and make them believe all those characters and believe that
Are
those things are
real.
actually
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah.
Um, and just cohesive production design, it's not in every project. And so when
Yeah.
you see it like that, where it's just everybody has worked together, whether there were fights in the background, like solving
Yeah.
problems, that doesn't matter. It's just that at the end, the cohesion is really everything. So,
Yeah. I agree with that so much. I end up talking, I'm probably going to do another 10 videos on Written on the Wind just because every from the set design to the oil derricks to the Dorothy Malone outfits to Robert Stack's performance, there's any individual thing to your point you can point to in that movie. It's like everyone is top notch in that.
yeah.
I adore that movie so much. So okay, so let me share my screen and so I pulled some lovely screenshots and images from Larry's website
Right.
as well as my own
Here
movie
she is.
collection. Yeah. So Larry, I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you. So this is, and I don't know. I'm going to try and put this in a delicate way, but I'd be curious as for both of you and Colleen too. Um, One thing when you had said, so when we were talking about what costumes to bring up, Colleen had mentioned that there's actually two versions of Cleopatra, in the book, I believe. There's the
Right.
1934 with Claudette Colbert and the 1963 or 64 with Liz Taylor. The Liz Taylor one was actually a recent watch for me. I haven't seen the 34 one, but I just one of those movies that I'd grown up with. And you talk about a movie for costume. I think Liz Taylor has about, I think you listed in the book as I think like 67
right.
outfits,
Yeah,
and
it's
then 25 didn't even get used,
Yeah.
which is.
Yeah.
But I was curious. One thing I noticed in terms of the Hays Code, these movies seem to be at the tail end of the Hays Code.
Right.
One was 34, one was 63, 64, and
Yeah.
both. So Larry, goes to a question. So to the original thing about how I found out about Larry, when he was talking, one of the things that he mentioned in his video on Now Voyager for the Criterion collection, which highly recommend go out and buy that just for Larry's special feature. It's that
Yeah.
worth it, and the movie's great. But Larry had mentioned that Ori Kelly, the designer in that movie, specifically used to dress Betty Davis's bust because she was famously she didn't like wearing bras, I believe. And so
Not
he
in
would have,
not in contemporary. In contemporary films, she refused to.
yeah. And so he would like put pockets there. I think you go over in Now Voyager or
Uh-huh.
otherwise. So
Uh-huh.
one thing I noticed both in the costumes at the tail end, and I kind of wanted to get both your thoughts from the history, is like, it's almost like a bookend where it's like, this is very forward in 1934, let's say. And then the Liz Taylor, well, this is one of the
That's
dresses
Liz
that,
Taylor.
yeah, that's Liz Taylor. And then I
The
pulled some
green.
screenshots in the movie. She is in the movie. Again, they dress her sort of very similar to where she
Yeah.
is very, let's say, bust forward costume
Yeah.
wise. So I guess from like the Hays Code, it was this like a, I'm trying to even think of the right way to ask the question. Like, are these sort of proper bookends to the Hays Code where it's like you
Oh,
got a little bit more lurid on both sides of it from
I
a
think.
history
Well,
perspective?
this film was, I think, released just as the Hays Codes came into effect.
Yeah, they
So
got away with a lot on this
this
one.
this
It seems like
just
Yeah.
this just came in under the wire, and had the Hays Codes been sooner, they would have cut a lot of scenes out of this, and they probably would have cut
Yeah.
this outfit out, because there is nothing about this dress and her body that that's what there was. What there wasn't dress was body,
It's a
and
piece of
and it's
fabric.
and they're just a piece of fabric. So it's sort of like, and they're just barely hanging on, and it was like they would have never allowed that. When this outfit was used in the scene where they roll her out of the rug when she first meets Caesar, and if you watch closely. When she first falls out of the rug, she is falling out of the top of that. It quickly cuts and then she's back in it again. But it's sort of like that wouldn't have been allowed. That it was almost not allowed then. But I mean, because they did stuff her back in. But that is, I mean, there is no bra, there is no structure of any kind built into this piece that is going to hold it where you want it to be. And I don't
And
know.
there was no wardrobe tape
I
at
don't
the
think they
time.
had toupee tape back then.
No.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
maybe, but
I mean, maybe. And then it's cut up to here. So, on the sides or the front panel. So, I mean, it is it's a very risque, and especially for the 1930s. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like,
It's a stunning
uh,
piece.
but sometimes, I think they got away with more in the 1930s than they got away certainly in the 1970s or
definitely.
80s.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's sort of like they could get away with it. But
Yeah.
her costumes in this film are absolutely wonderful. I mean,
They're
it goes
beautiful.
from this to the green one, which is sort of,
Hmm.
and these have nothing to do with actual Egyptian fashions. You understand? I mean,
Zero. Yeah.
these are Hollywood's inversion of Hollywood fashions, especially this. And now, well, Elizabeth Taylor's. We'll get to that later, but it's like, but this is a study in bias cut
Mm.
satin. I mean, and I
Yep.
doubt whether she ever wore the real Cleopatra or anything like this. First of all, I don't think they had
They
satin.
did
What
not
is it,
have
slicker
satin. I
satin or
can confirm they did not
okay?
Yeah.
have satin. They
Go
did
to the.
have lame, but they
They
didn't
did
have
have
satin.
lame. They
Yeah.
did.
Yeah, they did with their version of lame because that was the beginning. Like they
Wow.
wrapped little gold wires around linen threads and then they could weave metallic into fabric.
Right.
But not satin. No, no.
Mm.
Yeah. And the
Satin
Well,
is
fun.
funny
Oh,
weave, so
sorry.
no. That's nerdy though. We just did a whole episode on this movie on the Claudette Colbert, so there's some good stories in there. But yeah, that black dress is just a piece of fabric. In fact, Larry
yeah.
saw it when he first found it, right,
Yeah,
Larry? It's
it
just
was
a piece of
when I
fabric
found
hanging on
it.
a hanger.
Yeah, when I found this piece, there was a costume house that had pieces that they were selling, and you were given 30 minutes to go through the racks. There were about 5 or 6 racks. You couldn't go and research it. You had to say, yes, I want this. Yes, no, I don't. They didn't. They had no idea what studios they were from. They had no idea if it was worn by a star or not. You just would go through and you could pick, and then they would tell you, okay, that's going to be $30, that's going to be $100 or whatever. And this was literally 2 pieces of fabric hang over a hanger.
None of
And
this metal, the metal stuff wasn't there. That was recreated later.
the metal medallions were later recreated,
Mm.
but it was like those metal pieces are the only thing that's holding that dress together. So it had to have them,
Yeah.
and so you have the only reason I. And this was from because we had processed a lot of processed a lot of wardrobe in our time, and we knew that it had a small tag in it that said AU two, I
It's
think, or
that
something like that.
image you have, Jeff. That
It's
Yeah.
little
that,
baby tag,
and
yeah.
that tag I had seen before on pieces that came out of Warner Brothers, or not Warner Brothers, Paramount.
Yeah.
And it had nothing to do with it had no tie to the production. I don't think it had to do with where it was stored in storage. And AU was particularly was probably period or whatever, or showgirl or something, because that's what we thought it could be, was a showgirl.
Mm,
But then we looked at it and thought, now this kind of looks Egyptian, and then we thought,
yeah.
well, it's probably somebody standing in the background, and blah blah blah. So we watched. It must have been one of the first ones that we watched because we had a video of it, or well, it was video back then, and she gets rolled out of the rug, and it was just like blah, 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 blah. Of course,
That's it.
then you have to look at them really closely. Now you go, okay, silhouette wise it looks like that piece, but now is it that piece? Does the beadwork match?
Hmm.
So you would get clumps, or as close up as you could of the beadwork, and say, are these beads in the same are the same beads in the same position, and all of that
Mm,
stuff, or was it just a mass produced dress that they stuck everybody in?
mm,
And it does come out. It came out, so it's
Yeah.
original. So it's exciting. It's exciting, but I love these pieces. I love Egyptian. I love
yeah.
the whole concept of Egyptian. Now the Taylor Egyptian, I'm
Well,
not
wait,
so.
Jeff, you were gonna, yeah, but that's this whole period thing, right? Where the period of the movie is reflected in the
A
costumes,
period of the
right?
time. Yeah.
Not the period the story is told, the period the movie was
Oh,
produced
yeah.
in is
Yeah.
reflected in the look of the costume. So when you get to the Elizabeth Taylor, it's like everything she wears is a 60s evening gown, and it just is. It's just the same like 60s evening gown pattern, and it's
Hmm.
just been beaded with. This is one of the few where it's a full tunic and there's not that empire waist seam, but all these, there's a lot of them where it just cuts off at that really kind of almost under the bust or really high natural waist, and
Mm,
it's like the same
And it's
silhouette.
I find it's like, I don't know. I mean, I had a thing for Elizabeth Taylor. I mean, and I always thought you could never have too many Elizabeth Taylors. And we collected quite a few Elizabeth Taylors.
Yeah.
I wish I would have said the same for Audrey Hepburn, and I didn't, and I should have.
mm,
But it was like we have there's a lot of Elizabeth Taylor in the collection, or pretty a good number of them anyway. And so I always liked her, but I didn't think she was always the best actress in the world.
mm.
Um, it was more about being Elizabeth Taylor. And I think this film suffered. Well, I shouldn't be giving this. I'm not here to bash
It
Elizabeth
is a
Taylor. I'm
pretty
here to.
epically long film, so if the
It's an
costumes
epically
weren't as
long
cool
film,
as they were, it would be just,
and I actually
Should have been
between
two
the
movies, I
yeah,
think.
of the
Yeah.
yeah.
two movies, I think that it's like the Colbert works better,
Yeah.
because I think she always wanted to play the role. When she first started the role, she wanted to play it with a sense of humor, and I
Hmm.
think she did. And her seduction was kind of a cutesy way of seducing. I mean, the story's the same. The woman uses her guiles to seduce men and gain power, but it's sort of like there was a little bit more innocence in Colbert, even though it was sexual. There was some sexuality going on in it. It
Yeah.
wasn't. It wasn't sexuality a la Elizabeth Taylor,
Right.
Richard Burton style. And I
Yeah.
think and it was, which is far more out there, far more modern, and it didn't have that innocence. It would just overlook like a big blow
I
up.
mean, it was a very thinly veiled actual affair in real life, so there's that too, right? Like the
Yeah.
drama
Yeah.
behind the scenes.
But I
Yeah.
think I think the woman was absolutely beautiful. But
Yeah.
She was really.
Yeah. This, I kind of, when I watch it next, I probably might watch it in two separate parts because I was
I,
reading some of the history of it, and I think Matt
yeah,
Wintz wanted to do it, as like, he wanted to call it like, I think Cleopatra and Julius Caesar, and then Cleopatra and Antony,
it
which
was going
sort
to
of
be.
makes sense from the rising and falling. And also, it's a lot to ask for a 4 hour
Well,
It's a
I
The
think
whole
lot.
movie.
There's an
the
intermission,
original
but
movie I
that's it,
think was like 8 hours long. I mean,
Yeah.
and they were going to cut it into two movies. It was going to be Elizabeth and Caesar and
Yeah,
Elizabeth
yeah.
and or not Elizabeth, Cleopatra and split it in two pieces. But because the whole thing of their affair came out during the filming of it, they were afraid, and the audiences were reacting. They were afraid to split it into two films in
Mm.
case they didn't go see the second film.
Oh, that makes sense. That
Yeah.
You
makes a
know,
lot of
it's sort of
sense.
like if the public turns on them for this affair, then the second film is dead.
Yeah.
So let's just combine them and cut it down from 8 hours to 4 hours or however long that thing was,
Yeah.
and see what happens.
Yeah.
Um,
Those
I
costumes
still,
are epic,
it's
in
epic,
that.
yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
beautiful to look at.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And I think the costumes are beautiful in their 60s sort of way, especially for
Yeah,
her.
they are.
And
Yeah.
Yeah.
what bugs me more than the costumes is her hairstyles. I mean,
Yeah.
some of those Egyptian headdresses are like
Yeah.
my mother wore. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I love Joseph Mankiewicz so much, and suddenly,
Yeah.
speaking of costumes, suddenly last summer with Katharine Hepburn and the bird metaphors in that movie,
Oh,
some of the best costuming you'll ever see. I would,
yeah.
if you know where that bird outfit that Katharine
Yeah.
Hepburn wears with the veil, I'd love to see that one.
Yeah. Yeah. I've
Um,
just never seen it.
so I
Seen
want,
very few Catherine Hepburns, and I don't know why. It's funny.
Mhm.
Well, as it gets into the whole hoo-ha of collecting, but it's amazing the stars that don't show up, and I
Yeah,
don't know if they don't show up because their things were coveted back then and somebody took them, or the
yeah,
star took them,
Yeah.
or the style that they wore sort of blended into everything else that just looked like, man, it's just another dress.
I wonder if it was a bit gendered with Hepburn because she was known for wearing more pants, right? I wonder
Yeah,
if people were like, well, who's going to want to collect these pants? When like
uh,
now, I probably imagine
yeah,
everyone would want access
everybody
to
would
like,
want him.
yeah,
Everybody would want him now. Yeah,
yeah.
I know, but you don't know why certain things survive and certain things don't. I mean, some of
Mhm.
it's luck of the draw. It's the luck.
So I wanted to ask, so Colleen, given our time left, I wanted to make sure and ask about, given your history as a burlesque expert.
Mhm.
I watched Cabaret for the first time last night in
Oh
preparation
my
for this
goodness.
interview. Yeah, so
Oh,
I will say
first
thank you.
time?
First, somehow it's
You're
one of those.
welcome.
Yeah,
Oh,
well, I will say thank you, but I didn't realize how
Cool.
sad that movie is. Like
Yeah. It's a
how
dark story.
Bob Fosse, what a genius!
yeah.
I'm so in awe of him. And obviously, Liza Minnelli, everyone in that movie is tremendous. I thought this piece in particular, when I was reading about it in the book, I think you had mentioned that the anecdote about Gwen Verdon. Is it Verdon
Yeah.
or I can never remember. Gwen Verdon?
Gwen
Burden, I
Verdon.
think.
Verdon. Okay.
Mhm.
Taking Liza Minnelli shopping through the flea markets of Paris and London. And I was
Yeah.
curious, like, as a costume, like, did that kind of start in the 70s from a film history standpoint? Because in my mental sort of Hollywood history, like, it seems like probably a lot of stuff was like studio based up until maybe the 60s, 70s. But I guess I'm just kind of curious, like, are there a lot of examples of like someone going through the flea markets of Paris prior
Oh
to like a cabaret? Really?
I yeah, I
I
mean,
think so.
I think costuming, maybe when it was earlier in film, you hear about the stars like getting roles because their own personal wardrobe was great and they were using their personal wardrobe as the costumes for the movie. But then as you get into studio production where there actually are costume shops building things, they're still not necessarily building everything.
Mm.
Depending on what it is, if it's a really stylized world and they're inventing like a future, then there's a lot more costume production involved. If you're doing something, even if it's within like this was, if it's within like several decades of the decade you're making the movie in,
Mhm.
you would go and get actual vintage clothing and use actual vintage clothing as part of the production. I don't think that's weird. And at
Mm.
least not from mid-century on. Um, I wouldn't think that was strange that they were using some vintage pieces
Yeah.
as part of their costume design. I mean, the nature of costume design is that there's a budget, there's always a budget,
Hmm.
and they're always asking for twice as much as the budget they give you. And so you have to pick and choose what you're spending your money on or not. Um, this is a beautiful piece that, I mean, it's just a stunning thing that they found, but I think there's a
Hmm.
lot of vintage use and vintage shopping as part of film and costuming. Um, it depends what you have access to. I mean, the other story about this is that they were trying to find costumes from the studio there that might actually have pieces from Weimar, Germany, and they weren't given access, I think, because the studio was a little bit questioning, what the content of the movie was going to be and how Germany was going to look and like that kind of thing. So they had less access to those items. But,
Hmm.
the costume designer situation on that film was also a little interesting,
Mm.
non-traditional.
Uh,
And I think Gwen had a role in getting things finished, as you might be able to see in the recent miniseries that happened,
Fosse Verdon.
Fosse Verdon, which is amazing. So I'm not surprised they're using vintage, and I'm not surprised that she had a role in it, and um, it's still valid because it's such a centerpiece of this scene. This is like a major scene in the film. So,
and this
Yeah.
piece has a story to it. It was like it was sold originally. So it was sold at a, I don't know if it was Broadway Cares, but it was something like that.
like an
And Gwen
auction.
Verdon was at the auction, and she was this was one of the pieces she had put up for auction. And so she was telling the story about it, and she was saying that they had found it. And it is, I mean, it's absolutely, it's this sort of purple silk, and then it has this purple, very slight purple net. And then on top of the net is embroidered all these flowers. And the net was just giving out. So Gwen would sit in her dressing room, in Liza's dressing room, and just sew this thing together. And when you look at it, it kind of looks like it's been hacked back together again. But then that's what Sally Bowles would have done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, she would have sewed that thing back together over and over and over again.
So
So,
would every burlesque performer in the history of burlesque as well.
right,
You know?
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So
I go
it's
ahead. Sorry.
fascinating the stories and I mean and how it the reality of it fits so much into the characters of it and that's what the costumes do. I mean they create those characters and those clothes they should put them on and they should know where that came from and they should know because it is their second skin and there's so
Yeah.
much thought that goes into
Yes.
creating that is
Yes.
so totally not recognized by the general public. And
Yeah.
it's and when you see something and then you find about it, and that's been the fascinating part of having the collection is finding this stuff out and getting that close to the piece. And when you really get to go through it and examine a piece really close, you do start to see things that other people probably don't see and
Yeah.
get to see. And you realize, oh, that's why they did this. They always dressed her in this color. Oh,
Mhm.
they always cut something in that. That was her thing. It's it's a fascinating form of art, and glad I get to show it.
Yeah. This movie in particular, I thought was really. I thought Fosse in general, he seems to have a uh, appreciation for non, let's call it quote unquote traditional like aspects of beauty. Like the
Mm.
every burlesque dancer in this was so beautiful, and the way he shot them and filmed them, like he just not pulled, but saw the beauty in it. And yeah, I from a costume collection standpoint, I guess Larry, like something like this, it might not be like certainly for me, I would be like, oh yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that this particular piece, and this is a pretty stunning piece, but for
Yeah.
even from that movie. But I'm curious also, and maybe a question for Coleen too. Like it's easy to look at an Oleg Cassini outfit and say like, well, that's got to be somewhere, and probably someone archived that. But is the history of stuff that like isn't, I guess, is like mainstream, like uh, heteronormative, like beauty normative, like do we still have a fair amount of that stuff that isn't like, the Oleg Cassini, maybe Ori Kelly, maybe Adrian, like stuff? Do we still have like a history of that, like these other sort of non-traditional outfits, I guess? Has there been more stuff like this that's been able to be available and archived?
I have a thought about that too, Larry, about what I've seen from you.
Um, one of the things of collecting in this, I mean, it's a little bit not quite the point, but it was sort of the thing about collecting men's costumes was a lot of times sometimes they would keep a suit together. But a lot of times the pants would go to the pant department, the coat would go to the part, and they were separated. So they could be on, these pieces could be on opposite sides of the warehouse or the costume studio. So it was like, when a man's costumes, that's what you probably see more women's costumes than you do men's costumes, even though more of the design probably went into the women's costumes and they look better. But the suits were basically a suit. Now they were tailored to death to fit that actor, but they sort of blended into the woodwork, and especially came the time when they started to if a studio, and sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. It depends on the studio or the costume house. They would take the label out of a costume. Then that suit that belonged to Tyrone Power and was somewhat historical. Once that label was taken out of it, that suit is nothing. It is it's a nicely styled suit, but it's not. Who cares?
It's not like recognizable like this piece is.
Right.
Like,
no. Yeah.
But I would also say that, like, part of the reason some of these things are still around is because Larry and when Bill was around too, made the choice to put these in a collection and preserve them. And I don't think that that's happened with a lot of things. So I think there is a dedicated choice here to say this role was significant. This person was significant. This film was significant, not just in a way that, like, this costume was beautiful, but this actual role changed pop culture, or, it had a bigger impact societally. And I think there are a lot of things in this collection that are that. And Larry's point about, like, if the label comes out of it and it's a pair of jeans, it's a pair of jeans, and that's all it is. You know what I mean? But you had asked us before we did this, about the costumes that are more modern and are menswear, like Die Hard and Cliffhanger and those kinds of things where it's just like modern clothing.
Yeah.
And some of it, sometimes it has to do with the significance of the role. That costume could become important, but I just think there's a balance there, and there's a balance there that was partially created by Larry and Bill with this particular collection, where some of the selections were because of the role and not necessarily because it's like the fanciest costume you've ever seen. There's a balance in that. There's plenty of fancy and sparkly and heavily beaded and like amazingly intricate costumes, but roles are important too.
Yeah.
It's funny. This was the one that probably spoke to me the most when I saw the website. This is John Bruce Willis's John McClane's outfit in Die Hard 2. Just randomly, just me dating myself. But when I grew up, this movie was always on TNT and TBS. Die Hard 2, not Die Hard 1, but Die Hard 2. So I've probably seen this movie like 3,000 times. So this exact one, I was like, oh my goodness, that's in the airport when he's getting in the thing, and it's the sweater. So.
It's funny. It's why there's quite a few of these characters that were those 80s and 90s everyman superheroes that was always fighting against either the Russians or the aliens or somebody bad and got beat up along the way, but came out of it smelling like a rose. And it was like, and a lot of them were wearing street clothes, and they are street clothes. And one of the reasons why we have these, because we were at the time in the 70s or in the 80s and 90s, we were working in a production wardrobe place that sold post-production wardrobe to the public. And our job was to go through and pull out some star pieces and And so we did, and then they would sell them, and sometimes we would buy them, and we bought these. And so for the Die Hard and the Al Pacino and the Schwarzenegger years and all of those films, they sort of did. That's why they're in the collection, is because that's what was being processed at the
Yeah.
time, and they were all street clothes. And I think in the website, I don't know if I have it. Yeah, it might be in the website. The descriptions of the pieces, it says what labels they are, and they're
I
Gap.
think this is a Banana Republic,
Banana Republic.
sweater.
Yeah.
It's nothing really fancy, and it's, I mean, and it was, and they weren't. I mean, they were your everyday man, and that sort of gets into costume design and
It does.
costuming, but it's sort of like, but it, why would you go to, if there's something that is ready made, is which you're going to try to copy making, why not just buy it?
Yeah.
And then also product placement. Placement became very big, with
Yeah, it's
Valentino
much
and stuff,
harder
when they
now.
would do
Like,
the
it
films, and
happens more
they
now.
would do the suits for the film, and then that would become, you know,
Yeah.
it was a way to
Yeah,
get
look
their
at that
name into the
Adidas
films.
logo right there.
Yeah.
So they do that. Now that, see, Adidas is getting credit
Yeah,
there.
exactly.
So,
Giorgio Armani, I think, was very famous for that, right? I
oh
remember
yeah, for
his suits and
Yeah,
the
there's a lot.
the Comfort of Strangers. His suits
Yeah.
where he dressed Christopher Walken are
yeah.
just so identifiable.
And some of those did come through. It's weird that some of them, a lot of them didn't come through because they probably took them back, or the actor probably took it because it was an expensive suit, which is, sometimes the actors had the right to do and could do.
Yeah.
I don't think they wanted these.
Yeah. Well,
But they're
Yeah.
amazing. And when you put together a film like this, it's so exciting, because this film is literally, this was from what is the film?
1993 Cliffhanger.
Cliffhanger.
Yeah,
That's it.
Sylvester Stallone and
I know,
John
I know,
Lithgow.
I knew it had to do with hiking, but
Yeah.
it was, and it's like, first of all, the opening scene of this film, I think, is absolutely incredible.
Yeah,
But
sounded big.
but it's sort of like but it is hiking wear, but there is thought that goes into that, and all the accoutrement and stuff, and it was like in the hammers and stuff. They have the
Yeah.
real ones, but they also have the rubber ones, because they were going to have them hanging on tension wires, with 40 pounds of stuff hanging off of them. It just there's so much thought that, and so I do appreciate this look too. Do I like these more than I like a big fancy period piece? Probably not. But I think these still tell a story
Yeah.
about that time period when they did those kind of films and the look that they created.
Yeah.
It's a new genre. Like, action films like that were a new genre,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Certainly a shift, right? I think honestly, I have a theory. I'll probably, by the time listeners, I might do a video on this at some point, but I think the shift has been, it feels like, probably, I think, huge towards more realistic, and like the idea that, like, a big point in Nosferatu is the realism of, like, we went to the 1830s and we looked at this and everything, probably in contra to bring out to the beginning, where we looked at some Egyptian dresses that are in no way Egyptian at all. Like, it's a zero to do with Egypt, just a very talented designer's idea of Egypt.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's sometimes it can be a flip for people. But these are all, I could talk your ears off of for another 6 hours about this, but yeah, these are all such beautiful pieces. This was one from Gypsy, I believe, which I would have loved to see.
It's
you
so
need
little.
to see that,
It
Jeff.
is.
If you haven't seen that movie, you gotta watch it.
You haven't
Yeah.
seen the movie?
No, Larry, you're killing me for movie stuff, because I don't know if you see behind me, I have like 2,000. That's my thing.
Okay. But
collecting
when you
Well,
watch,
we're like a bunch of musical
when you
theater
watch it,
nerds
talk
over
to
here.
me.
So
But I will give you a little bit. I will give you a bit about
A
this thing
list.
to watch out for when you watch this thing, or something that you realize about this. It was
hold it.
so it was like Natalie Wood created the role of Louise. Ori Kelly created Gypsy Rose Lee,
Yeah.
because Natalie Wood was 5'2" tall. She probably weighed 100 pounds, if that. She was very flat chested. She had no hips, and
Hmm.
this was about a voluptuous stripper.
Yeah.
So that all had to be built in to the
Yeah.
costumes. And they did a bunch of things to confront on this piece here, on the orange piece. He put all that beadwork on the hips to make the hips look wider.
Yeah.
He put
Yeah.
those strings hanging down to the floor to give her the illusion of height.
Yeah.
And the bras are totally 100% padded out. So
Stunning craftsmanship.
that made the costumes, and they perform well, and
Thank
it's
Yeah.
you.
like so it's like uh, that was truly, I mean, that was Ori Kelly was known for taking issues, body problems, and sort of concealing them,
Yeah.
but
Or as
and
you say
he's
in the Now Voyager commentary, saying like almost like an FU to the studio with him and Betty Davis, right? I think you made the point because
oh
they thought her
yeah,
neck was too long and that she had,
yeah,
and
I'll
she was,
show you.
someone thought Betty Davis was shaped wrong, which I don't understand. Like
I didn't.
crazy the body
I never
standards.
really saw it, and that film was so true to point as far
Yeah.
as she is saying "f you."
Yeah.
I'm gonna show my neck, and it didn't
Yeah.
look bad. It looked good. So
Yeah.
costumes do play a large part, more a part of a film and a character than I think people realize, and that is why I love them so much.
Yeah. Well, Larry, Colleen, I think I appreciate you so much for being here today. The book is The Costumes of Hollywood, Highlights from the Collection of Motion Picture Costume Design by Colleen Scott and Larry McQueen, which is releasing, I believe, June 6th.
Yeah, June 6th, and it's available for pre-order now with the publisher.
Routledge is the publisher. And you can go to costumesofhollywood.com and you can find that and see all the great pieces that we showed today and looked at today. So, Colleen, Larry, any final thoughts that you'd like to share with the audience?
Thank you, Jeff, for having us. Find us
Thank
on
you.
Instagram under Costumes of Hollywood too. It's been a pleasure. Larry,
Yeah,
anything?
it's been a pleasure, and I'm so happy to. It's like I've said, um, for years and years and years, uh, I and my like business partner came up with this concept, and I don't never really thought anybody knew or care was starting to get it,
Mm.
what we were trying to do and the vision that we had and what the story we were trying to tell with this collection. And it's finally starting to come in focus. And I'm as shocked as much as now my friends are when they go, "Oh, we didn't know that's what you did." And it's like, and to a certain extent, I didn't even know that's what we were doing. It was done out of because we loved it. We loved the process of doing it, and we learned the process of the correct way to take care of it, and it sort of became an entity of its own. So I thank Coleen totally for like bringing this story now out. And oh my God, I'm fading away into the dark. This is
Yeah, you're
very
very
not.
moody,
I look very
Jonathan.
Nofarastu.
You do.
Yeah.
You're very moody.
You got
Well,
Yeah.
thank you, Larry. I mean, for letting me work with you. This is for sure, Jeff. To just so you know, it's not. This has been like the best collaboration probably I've ever
Oh, it's been
had in my
wonderful.
career. So it's like a cherished friendship now, and
Yeah.
it's been amazing, and I'm very grateful.
Yes. Thanks so much.
Thank you, and honestly, I'll speak for the audience and every one of my followers. And like, you'd be shocked at the amount. Like, I cannot. It makes me emotional actually thinking about it. Like the efforts of people like you two and Marty Scorsese and like people who've like archived, just to think about how many films George Lucas, Coppola, like how many films we just wouldn't have if people didn't
Yeah.
pay attention to the costumes and films of this. So, yeah, I'm eternally grateful that I can even watch something and have a copy of Written on the Wind because someone decided
Yeah.
to care about it, right? And this was similar to this was regarded right as a woman's picture of the time, unimportant, and someone saw importance of that and was like, Douglas Sirk is great and we should save this, and you saw importance of these costumes, and then Colleen saw importance like, hey, we need to get this into a book, and just thank you both, from
Thanks.
everybody.
Thank you.
So
Thank
cool.
you. Thank you
Well,
so
thank
much.
you so much, and see you, everybody.
Bye.